So as I lead groups, occasionally a man will come to the group and tell us as a group, "Hey, my wife doesn't want to know when I'm struggling with sexual sin. She doesn't want to hear confession, at least not on a regular basis." So we're going to unpack this question. It's a really interesting kind of assertion or question. I'm James. I'm the director of projects here at Regeneration and a spiritual coach. I also have the privilege of running our year-round men's program, Awaken 360. And I'm joined today by Aaron and Ann, two coaches on our team. Aaron is spiritual coach. He helps us with the Awaken Men's Retreat. He's often known by his really profound nickname, Aaron. And I'm also joined by Ann, who works often with our betrayed spouses, but she also works with women dealing with unwanted sexual behavior. And Ann helps with our Sacred by Design retreat. And Ann is actually often featured on our women's podcast. We don't mention this enough, guys. We've got an awesome women's podcast called the Sacred by Design podcast. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. This is a podcast from the women on our team to women specifically. We try to have Becoming Whole be for men and women, but Sacred by Design is specifically speaking to women. So guys, we got to start with this question. Should I confess to my spouse if they don't want to hear it? What do you say to the man or woman who might be coming, they're struggling with sexual brokenness, their spouse doesn't know, and they are convinced that their spouse does not want to hear it? And do you want to start us out? Where do you go with that question
Oh
initially?
boy. Well, I am so excited to be here and to be a part of just helping men and women navigate this hard place. I get ready. I feel like I have notes all over the place, so I might be looking down at some of my notes.
That's fine.
Such a good question. Excuse me. Well, you almost have two questions in there. Like, should I tell my spouse what's going on in my life? Should I tell her that I'm struggling with pornography or lust or, sexual betrayals? And what if she doesn't want to know? What if she's
Right.
What if she's struggling with feeling flooded and overwhelmed with information? So where do we
And
go?
do you find a lot of women in that you work? Because again, you're often coaching one-on-one and leading groups for women, specifically wives who have experienced betrayal. Do you often find that they don't want to know? Or is this kind of a misnomer almost like, no, actually, really every wife wants to know? Or do they want to know some things and not other things? Help us begin, even just start unpacking that. And then I'd love to hear some initial thoughts from Aaron.
Well, they definitely don't want a lot of details, but they want the truth. This phrase, hurt me with the truth, kill me with a lie.
Wow.
But there are women who are real. I just want to validate for a woman who doesn't want to know because she's so overwhelmed. She's so scared. She's so afraid of information that's going to destabilize herself and her family and her marriage, that she, for a period of time, she just wants to get some safety and stability and does not want a lot of detail. And I just want to validate her. I just want her to feel heard, and that the husband can really still be transparent with her and say, I have safe people that I am talking to, and I am sharing what's going on in my life with my coach, with my best friend, with my accountability team. Like, I am being transparent. And just maybe she needs time, some safety, some stability.
So even if there is sometimes a wife that you're working with, and we're going to be speaking today to both husbands and wives who have experienced betrayal, but and those who are struggling, like, should I actually initiate this confession? But you're saying in that sometimes there's actually a real need for a wife to guard her own well-being, and she might recognize, whether kind of explicitly in her mind it's a clear thought or it's almost implicit, that she can't handle the fullness of hearing confession any given moment of any given day all the time. There
Yes.
actually can sometimes need to be some space or boundaries or something.
But to protect her well-being, like she probably is just feeling like she can't get through her day. It's so big.
Mm,
And she probably just um needs better support, her support systems,
mm,
and finding like some real inner safety and body, right? Her nervous system probably needs some real calming exercises and practices. And his like empathy and space and time and consistency and him being like predictable will really help calm down her system right now. And he can make a big difference in that.
So Aaron, what do you say? So you're often coaching men and leading groups for men who are dealing with sexual sin. What do you say to them? Have you ever come across this question? Should I really confess to my wife? She doesn't really want to hear it, or I'm terrified to because our marriage seems to be getting better. I'm working on myself. Does she really need to know that I've been struggling all these years? What do you how do you approach that if it ever comes across your table, so to speak?
Yeah. Man, you just said a couple different things there that make, I think, all the difference in that conversation. Um, I think, you know, I want to back up just a little bit because I think, at the, if the wife doesn't know anything's going on, um, I think this becomes almost a, I don't know if a tactic of the enemy or something to just like keep this thing a secret. She
Mm,
doesn't need to know. She doesn't want to know. I almost hear like that whisper in the garden. Does she really want to know? Right. And then it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I shouldn't say anything, because to be honest, I don't think any woman, like, it's not something you look forward to. You don't
yeah.
want to hear, hey, I need to sit down with you
Mm,
and tell you something really heavy. Because in a lot of ways, this is sort of like in the work that Ann and I do, it's like an earthquake.
mm,
This really shakes and rattles, almost, to the core. And that's where the repair can start to happen. But I feel like I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. But I just wanted to say, like, I don't like this isn't information that anyone's ever necessarily looking forward to. So, in one way, it's like, does she want to know? Like, probably in some way, no. But if you don't share this, right? And that's where I want to kind of get into a couple of things that you just shared a minute ago, James, is that, you know, if if the betrayer keeps this a secret,
mhm,
right? We know that even in scripture, right? Things that are hidden in darkness like remain there. And it's not until the light is shown on those things that there's actually exposure and healing
mm,
um, and Jesus is the light, right? So he wants to shine light on these places to bring these things that have been in darkness into the light, so that it can be dealt with appropriately and accordingly. And um, yeah, so one of the things that I instantly start to think of is, for the betrayer, right, which is most often,
in our
the
work,
husband,
the
right,
husband in our yeah.
right, it's the man in the relationship, more often than not. um and in some ways I hear well, okay, I'm rationalizing, if she knows, then what's that mean for us? You talked about like, oh, our relationship's actually going really great. But I would say the relationship that you think you have is going really great because you're holding information that she does not know, and that's not fair to her. Uh,
Thank you, Aaron.
yeah,
So you said it so well.
and I
Mhm.
think, that, and I think honestly that's probably what paralyzes most men from sharing, because there's this idea of like, well, if I share, it's over, or if I share, fill in the blank, and we don't know what's going to happen, and so that fear, we're more focused on the fear of the unknown in that situation than actually like walking this out, or what this might look like. And so I see it in some ways as sort of an excuse to not share. If she really knows, then what? Our relationship is going to change. Like, she's going to know this stuff that I've, hidden. And in some cases, James, I've had clients that have had this hidden for years, decades, and then it comes out, and then there's a whole lot of unpacking.
There's so much more to unpack
Yeah.
all those decades
Yeah.
down the road.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think, and then again, just thinking like, oh, well, she doesn't want to know. Well, that's again, you're convincing yourself that, well, oh, sure, she doesn't want to know it. So then it's easier for me to not share it. But again, you're aware of something that's going on that she's not aware of.
And actually, Aaron, I'm going to jump in real quick, is
Please,
most have a gut feeling that something's going on.
Oh, yeah.
And their body is telling them, pay attention, ask a question, like something is going on. And they're so smart. And they're being fooled and deceived. And their body is actually giving them information that something's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got to pull on that thread, Aaron, and of control, because when we're keeping the truth to ourselves, we control the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she's noticing a change. Maybe you started Awaken or a different recovery program, and she's like, whoa, something's different. Something good is happening. And you're thinking, yeah, like I'm working things. She doesn't need to know ever. I'm taking this to my grave. What we're doing actually is controlling the narrative, which actually can impede our own healing. Now, I'm not terribly familiar with the 12 steps. I've got some guys I walk with who have gone through the 12 steps, whether it's through alcohol, sex addiction, drugs, whatever it is. But I'm pretty sure one of the steps, maybe you guys know, is recognizing we can't control our lives. It's actually a step toward freedom, is recognizing that the control we've been trying to have is what drives us to our behavior in part. And by releasing control, by saying, I'm not going to control the narrative of my marriage anymore. I need true, authentic intimacy. I need true honesty, connection. And that will only come by releasing the control of controlling the narrative.
Yeah. James, I think that's step one.
Is it? Okay. You got to refresh me, man. Yeah.
I think it is isn't that the one where it's like you are powerless by yourself?
There we go.
You have no control, like, and that's the starting place.
Starting point.
Like, that step one is coming to that realization of like, yeah, shoot, man, I have tried all of these things. I've white knuckled. I've maybe even gone through, bouts of, sobriety where, you're not acting out, 6 months or, a year or something. And then you fall back into the cycle or whatever. And so, it's like, oh, I've tried this. And it's like, okay, you can't do this on your own. And so it's just that acknowledgement, I think is huge. And something else that you guys brought up too is that, I don't know if it was Anne who mentioned, or maybe it was you, James, again, I don't know, but if they're doing some work prior to sharing, I think that's actually very helpful. Because it starts to give them some language. And it also, when they share that information, it's not just, hey, here's all of the secrets, or whatever, but it's also, and I'm taking some steps to try to, figure this out and get better. And not that necessarily changes initially how that, goes over or is received from the partner. But I think, would you agree, Anne, that if there is some recovery sort of in action, that there's I don't know how to word that. It's not a softer blow, but it's there's something else that's there. It's not just coupled with, or it's not just the behaviors and those things, but you're already starting to try to provide some element of safety or change. I don't know what you would say to that.
Well, I think that they'd come with hopefully like some support in sharing, and I'd really like love to still provide like a voice for the wife who deserves the truth, and she deserves it uh, wholeheartedly. And so I don't want to, there's a fine line. Like I'm feeling like a little bit defensive for the woman out there who doesn't know.
Mhm.
And actually it's harming her,
Mhm.
not knowing this.
Well,
It's
so
deception.
Yeah.
So
this
it's
is,
really, but I hear the value in the husband getting help in
yeah,
order to share with
Yeah.
their wife.
it's hard medicine when we're actually getting honest with the person that we're most intimately connected with on this earth. It's hard medicine. It's letting go of that control. But we actually, friends, we want to introduce to you, we're going to be releasing a PDF that has 5 essential steps. It's titled 5 Essential Steps for Husbands in Recovery, but it would work as well for a wife who is the betrayer. But we actually want to outline these 5 steps today because we want to acknowledge that not everyone is in the same place in their marriage. First of all, many people start recovery, as Aaron was alluding to, because their spouse is found out, and that's what initially drives them. But occasionally there might be someone who realizes they're convicted by the Lord, like or a friend says to them, you really need to get after this. They start recovery, their spouse knows nothing, they've been married for a decade. That's occasionally the case. So we want to acknowledge both types of situations, and we want to answer this question that we've been getting at. Should I confess to my spouse, both on that macro level, they know nothing versus, sharing initially, but also on like a week to week level of, do I really need to confess at a weekly check-in or whatever that might look like? So I actually want to introduce, guys, these 5 steps, and we've worked on this as a team, pretty happy with how it's come out. But the 5 steps are, if you are beginning recovery, step 1 is start recovery. And so if you are literally like just hearing this, you've been listening to our podcast for a while, you've been struggling, you're married, perhaps your spouse doesn't know yet, plug right in. Like, don't take another moment to not. Like, we call it the 3 C's. Get community, so get a good support group. Our Awaken 360 program is a great example of this, year-round support for men. Get good content. Again, in a program like Awaken 360, you're going to be learning a ton, things that you really don't know. I often say to men, hey, you actually don't know all the reasons you're here. And that's a humbling reality, but it's a great place to be, to recognize there's stuff I have to learn. And the third C is coaching or counseling. So get that kind of one-on-one support to really begin unpacking your story in earnest. So if you've not done any recovery, just dive right in. That's what we say is step 1. Step 2, for the occasional man who has never ever shared, or the occasional woman who's never ever shared, your spouse needs to know. They need to know your struggles if they don't know anything yet. So if you're that unique person who you're thinking, I need to start recovery, my spouse doesn't know anything, sign right up, but don't hesitate, like Ann was just saying, to dive right into step 2, let your spouse know. And maybe you say, hey, I don't understand this yet. I'm signing up for some stuff. I'm getting into a group. I'm showing up at a 12-step group, whatever it is. And I need to confess this to you. I need to take control out of my own hands and let you know this has been a struggle. So if your spouse knows nothing, they need to know. That's step 2. And we're going to unpack these, by the way, guys. So I'm giving a brief flyover, but we're going to unpack these. Step 3, help your spouse get the support they need. They might need the 3 C's. They might need a group like those that Ann leads for betrayed wives. They might need coaching or counseling. They're going to need some content to understand what's happening to me right now as I'm experiencing this betrayal. And then step 4 is establish regular check-ins. We really do believe in these, and we'll explain more of why they're so important. And finally, step 5, set your marriage up for long-term healing. And some of that actually has to do with the work Ann and Aaron do in full therapeutic disclosures. We'll explain more of that as we get to it. But also the work Ann and I are doing in our Restored to More classes, where couples actually come together and begin working on recovery as a couple, not just individually. So these are the 5 basic steps. The reason we felt the need for this is We don't want someone to go through our groups for years, or let's just say a man has been working hard for several years on his recovery and he's never actually considered, I have a spouse who needs to know this. I have a spouse that I need to restore with. They need to know the truth. We need to actually, I keep getting the image, guys, of a broken bone. The bone needs to be reset so that the bone can heal. Very painful process. I've personally not had a broken bone. I don't know if either of you guys have had it. I've heard it's extremely painful, but necessary. It's a necessary medicine to have the bone reset. So we're
the
going to
body works best, right?
exactly for the long-term healing of the body. If you never reset that bone, the marriage is not going to actually be healing in a true, deep way. Okay, so we got to get into this a little bit. Again, in light of this question of some people coming in like, I don't think my spouse really wants to hear it. Why, Anne, is it so important? We outlined step one. For those who have never done any recovery, dive right in, do something. Why is it important to start, Anne, in your opinion, with your own work in the process of healing your marriage? Why is it important to do some of this individual work? And then, we'll get later to doing work as a couple. Why is it important to start with your own work?
Your willingness to do your own work is potentially saving your marriage. Healing cannot happen unless the betraying spouse transforms. That creates safety for her and stability in her life. And then it can create like what the couple wants together. She needs to see the evidence of hard work, and it really makes a difference. It creates from instability to stability. It's his work to dive in. It helps her body feel safer. That's what gets lost, is this inner feeling of, am I safe in this relationship? Because everything feels unsafe, unpredictable, scary, unfamiliar. What she thought was familiar now has changed. And his work is like groundwork. It like starts to like build momentum in her own well-being.
So him actually becoming renewed, transformed, healed in new ways actually will make an impact, and you're saying directly on his wife, or vice versa as well.
Oh, 100%. When he begins to unpack his shame and unpack like developmental wounds, body regulation, when he starts to do that, you can feel it in the whole house. You can feel it in the whole environment begins to soften and change. It's profound, really.
Aaron, I think of this often.
I love his work.
Yeah, I can't help but think of this often as this journey of maturity. I mean, so many of the men we're walking with, Aaron, are like, and this is myself included, I'm totally in this category. We've not learned how to regulate emotions well. We have not learned how to meet our needs in healthy ways. How do you see that begin to make differences, Aaron, in the couples you work with? Because again, you and Ann do these disclosures. You're often helping a man, sometimes for months or years before they're ready to do a disclosure. So in the coaching you do, or even in the groups you lead, like Unwanted, how do you see that maturity journey begin to take root in the household, not just impacting the husband, but actually impacting the whole family?
Yeah, that's good. I think, there is a growing in the awareness of this isn't just hurting you, right? This isn't just about, what maybe you've done or what you've concealed or hidden, and that it impacts those around us and those that we love the most. And when you start to as Anna was talking, I was thinking, what's not known can't be healed. And think about how, like, when somebody, maybe has had, something wrong with their system for a long time and they didn't know what it was. And then they get that clarity. Oh, this diagnosis, like, this is what's going on. Now I can get the healing, that I need. But when you're not aware of it, you can't get the healing for it. And so what's not known can't be healed. And so once it is known, then there is that opportunity for both, because both will need to step into a journey. And that's the thing here too, is that it's not just about his journey, it's also about her journey too. And so when I'm working with guys, one of the first things I ask them is, does your wife have support? Is she meeting with anybody?
Which we'll get to in a
Especially-
moment with step 3, actually probably next week in our next week's episode, talking about
Yeah.
step 3.
And so because it's so important, like, because she's now going to have a journey that she's going to need to enter into, which could feel sort of unfair because it's not something that she wanted, it's not something that she expected, but it is a reality in sort of the recovery work, because for that relationship to thrive and to heal, both of them are also going to need to heal. There's 3 components. There's his healing, her healing, and then their relational healing. And so I think, like, the growing in that empathy and beginning to see, I know some guys even wrestle with the word betrayal. Like, it was just, pornography. I wasn't acting out with any other person or whatever. But if you sort of kind of go to the definition of, like, betrayal, like, essentially you've acted sexually outside of your marriage relationship with your spouse. That is betrayal. And we don't need to get into the weeds of, what is, if you prescribe to that, or, that's kind of, it's what it is.
I remember
So
Jay Stringer in Unwanted quotes someone who says that pornography is pictures of prostitution. And so
yeah.
for many of us, it can feel like, well, this is pretty different. But man, this is where Jesus's Sermon on the Mount comes right in. Like, he's like, hey, you're lusting in your heart. You've committed adultery. Because I think in Jesus's eyes, the same roots of lust bear the fruit of pornography, and further up the tree, they bear the fruit of adultery. I mean, it's all the same roots. It's all the same root system. Like, when we're struggling with lust or giving into lust, we're actually participating in that same system, whether the degree is higher or lower in our eyes, like, oh, I didn't actually physically connect with someone versus I looked at pornography. Either way, it's still the same kind of root. It's still, and maybe you can speak to this, but it's still that seeing the spouse as an object rather than a person to be loved. I mean, when we're looking at pornography, we're training our brain. What I'm trying to say is we're training our brains to see people as objects to be used for our own pleasure, for our own regulation, for our own help and our own salvation, if I can use that word in this funny way. And that actually is distorting the whole way often the husband, if they're the betrayer, is looking at their wife in the first place.
Yeah,
It's
and
training the brain
wife,
for not really seeing the person in front of them.
right, and it really hurts the wife at such a core level. Like, I'm not enough. I'm not what you want. I'll never be what you want. And then she feels such self-loathing. I mean, it breaks your heart.
Yeah.
Like, the whole dynamic.
Yeah,
Well,
John Paul II in his Theology of the Body, or even the precursor, Love and Responsibility, is saying, look, we often are struggling, and this is the struggle in every marriage, by the way, according to John Paul II, to see the person as this infinitely valuable being. And so if every marriage struggles with that, even if there's not pornography or affairs or other sexual sin involved, it's still a journey of actually, like, seeing your spouse through the eyes of God as this eternal being, beloved, of eternal value in God's eyes.
And that is what every woman wants and craves and is hoping for.
Yeah.
That deep love.
So Guys, I think what we're gonna have to do is pause for today, and we're gonna come back to the steps 2 through 5 next week. Again, in light of this question, should I confess to my spouse if they don't want to hear it? But I want to encourage you, in the show notes will be the PDF of these 5 steps. You can follow along with us. You can look at them. You can wrestle with them. And we're here to talk about them. These are not, we didn't write scripture here. So we're not saying these are utterly perfect and infallible. But we are saying that for so many of, especially the men we walk with, to not realize there's this other person involved, if they're married, that needs to be cared for. And by the way, as Aaron was alluding to, the empathy you're called to develop as a husband, or if you're a wife who has betrayed, the empathy you're called to develop for your spouse is another part of your healing. It's another part of my healing. It's part of our development into Christ likeness, knowing how to actually see and love the people in our midst. So we want to encourage you, check out that PDF. We're going to continue walking through it next week. Aaron or Ann, any kind of final words, and would one of you be willing to pray for us?
Yeah, I did have something I wanted to share too. And especially, I'm just thinking of the listener right now that is perhaps terrified of entering into what does this actually mean and what does this look like. If you step into this journey, there's sort of like there's no going back, right? Like once you've shared that information, it's known, and now you enter into this. But I would say, to that individual or individuals, disclosure is always better than discovery. Discovery is so much harder because and again, and I don't make light of that, and the disclosing is also very hard. But when a wife walks in on you, or whatever it might be, or you left your phone on the counter and a text message came through from somebody else that you've been acting out with, or whatever the case might be, that is so much different and harder. And I don't know if Ann can speak briefly to that, the difference, but I just want to encourage, especially, anyone who is kind of stuck in that place, that I truly do believe that disclosing that information is better than it being discovered.
Yeah, the long-term benefit is significant. And my last parting words are, find the courage to be a transforming spouse. Like, find the courage and make a difference. One that you'll never regret.
Will you pray that courage over us and our listeners?
Yes, I'd love to. Lord, I pray for any man or woman that's listening today that feels terrified. Would you breathe your courage into their body and soul and mind? Would you give courage and strength, honesty and power that will actually transform not only potentially the wife, the spouse that's listening, but the entire family and generations to come. And I bless you with courage today. Amen.
Amen.